Okay, this is Mod coming to you from Southern Arizona.
And this is Fritz in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
All right, we're going to talk about season 5, episode 25, our favorite season, season 5, episode 25, Inner Light. And I'm going to say it. I say it all the time, but this really is how the show starts. The show starts with the Enterprise putzing around the universe looking for alien life forms. Watch it. That's what it says they're doing. And they stumble upon, lo and behold, they stumble upon this probe, or what they later identify as a probe, that's putzing around the universe with them. And they stumble onto it, and they do some analysis on it, and they determine that it's like some really old school. They said like ceramic or something, so it was like really old material. They didn't say that it was much of a threat. They didn't see it as a threat to them. But somehow it was sufficient enough of a threat that they put up their force fields, and somehow some kind of a ray got through their force field. And it hits, of all people, it hits Picard. And Picard is about to, say, let's get out of here. And then just mid-sentence, he just collapses. And, they don't know what's wrong with him. So what happens is, he suddenly wakes up in a different world. He ends up in a very simple world that people are dressed simply. The buildings are all very simple, simple people around him, and he sees him. He's watching some kind of a ceremony in this small town. Right, so just to backtrack, so he collapses on the Enterprise. In the next instant, he finds himself in this different world, and in this world, there's this big ceremony about this tree they're planting, and this guy named Patai is doing the ceremony to plant this tree because apparently there's this big drought in this town, and they want to do the ceremony to symbolize the growth and the future and the hope of this town to overcome this drought and to have something grow. And then this storyline proceeds where he finds himself more and more immersed in this town. It turns out there's this woman that calls him her husband. Her name was Helene. And his name, it turns out, in this other world is called Kanan. So he now finds himself as Kanan. He's dressed the same way everybody else is dressed, which is, like I said, very simple clothes. And he starts grilling this woman Helene about what's going on here, and she keeps telling him, look, you've been sick for a couple of weeks, and this is all result of a fever. You've lost your memory. You're my husband. We live in this house. We've been married, I think, 3 years. You need to rest, stay inside and rest, because you've just been sick so long. And he doesn't listen to her. He goes out. He's trying to explore. He looks like he feels fine. And he befriends this guy Patai, who turns out to be a council member, it turns out they were buddies. Him and this Kanan guy, who apparently is the shoes that Picard is now filling. It goes on, and then.
But it's important to say that Picard, when he finds himself in this situation, he has total recall of himself as Picard. He's confused because he remembers that a minute before he was on the Enterprise and he's lived his life
he was confused. Yeah, he's not confused about his identity. He's confused about what's going on.
Yeah.
He's very clear about his identity. He's
right. He has complete recall of his life as Picard, and that's what he's wrestling with. He's wrestling with who am I now when I thought I was Picard from Starfleet?
Right. So now at this point, I can ruin this storytelling by bouncing back to all the putzing around that's going in the Enterprise, which includes Riker, making horrible judgment decisions that almost literally kills
Again,
Picard.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, again, we have another episode where Riker is undermining all the amazing things that are happening in an episode. So I'm not even sure I want to go into that, other than one of the stupidest thing Riker does is they're trying to bring Picard back to consciousness because he's collapsed, and they recognize that what's happening is that this thing that they thought was a
probe.
What do you call it? A probe is emitting some rays that are controlling his mind. This is what Dr. Crusher was saying, is that his mind is extremely fully active, even though his body's not. And by the way, Fritz, if you want to go back at Dr. Crusher's performance, this is like, even for her, this is really bad acting. She has some scenes where it's just like her motions are just so over deliberate. It's like so conscious. Oh, I need to move my hands like this. It's like it's like she read it, move your hands like this, and then she does it. She's really a terrible actress.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't bother me this episode. I mean, this episode is so it has
nothing to do with the Enterprise.
It's so bifurcated that it's like the time on the Enterprise is just interludes before you get back to the real story.
I think they have a contract with the actors where they have to use them, but I think it detracted from the story. I would have much rather just stayed on this planet. By the way, the planet's name was Kataan. But so the mucking around that they do on the Enterprise is to try to disengage. So Dr. Crusher is telling Riker, so Riker's getting advice from different people. So Dr. Crusher is saying, don't disengage. I'm sorry.
Picard.
Don't disengage Picard from the probe because we don't know what the ramifications are. There's a big, strong connection. It's in his brain. If you disconnect them, we don't know what's going to happen. It's too risky.
Right.
And then I don't know who was telling him to disengage. It's probably Worf, right? Because if we go according to form, Worf's
save the
job
captain.
in the world is to give him bad advice. And of course, it's Riker's role in the world to always take the bad advice.
Yeah.
So he takes the bad advice and tries to disengage him and almost kills Picard. So that's the kind of mucking around that's going on that I'm not going to get involved in on the Enterprise. So back on Kataan. So time is flying. It's years are going by in Kataan with Picard. We're fast forwarding to and they're aging him. You're seeing him as he ages in this planet, and you get to a point 3 or 4 years later, where he seems to have turned the corners. Now is accepted. He doesn't, maybe he never understood how he ended up on this planet, but he's accepted that this is his new life, and he decides to have children with Helene. And so they have a baby. I don't remember what her name was. They have a baby Noise. So this guy Patai, that he was his first friend, he ended up dying from some mysterious cause. So he calls his first son after Patai. And then he raises his children. It seems like he's to me, Fritz, it seemed like he was really enjoying his new world, his new life there. He's a family, his kids, very simple life. He plays the flute. His job was they never actually showed him at work, but he was like a metal weaver, or I can't remember what he was, something like a metal weaver.
Yeah,
but they never showed us what he did. What he did as a hobby was he played the flute, though.
Mm-hmm.
And he seemed like he just had a very simple life, and he expounded wisdom onto his kids. I don't know. So
but he was also preoccupied with the drought.
Yeah. Right. So he was doing studies on the soil and everything, and he determined that there was a drought. He even had a telescope. He recognized that there was some severe atmospheric problems. He's expounding his scientific method to his kids. His daughter ends up also having kids, by the way. So they show a quote touching or supposedly touching moment of Picard, who's this really stern captain of the Enterprise, acting silly with his grandkids. and really seeming like he's enjoying himself. And his daughter, who, is a Picard offspring, is very scientific, and she confronts him and it says, look, what I've seen in the soil shows to me that our planet seems to be dying. He doesn't deny it, but he says, this is the things I wanted to really keep from you. I wanted you, since there's nothing you can do about it, I didn't want you to have to learn this. And she said, well, I don't think you really mean that. I think the way you taught me is you really want me to know the truth, regardless of how pleasant or unpleasant it is. And so, that was a poignant moment where, it just, you came to the realization that this planet was a dying planet. If you're back on the Enterprise, they traced where this probe came from, and they determined that the planet actually, it was in a solar system where the sun went supernova, and everybody on the planet had died 1,000 years earlier. And so, this is something Picard and his daughter both recognized was going to happen. And so, I think I skipped through a lot of the minutia in the episode, but as far as the plot goes, that was the next main thing that happened. Was there's, at this point, Picard is, or Kataan, no, I'm sorry, Kanan. Kanan is an old man, and his daughter's telling him, hey, come on, let's go see there's a rocket launch, let's go see it. He's like, he's a grumpy old man. He's like, I don't want to go anywhere. And she's like, come on, Granddad, we gotta go. I'm sorry, Dad, we come see the launch. Let's come see the launch. And they imply that the supernova is coming because everybody now has to wear these big sun hats. They have to wear sunscreen. So you could tell that, it's becoming more and more evident to everybody there that the planet's dying. So they go to the launch, and it was right after the launch you get this big reveal where Patai, who had died, shows up. They see the rocket launch, and then and he said something like, "Oh, I've never seen this launch before, or this rocket launch before." And Patai, who theoretically had died earlier, says, he comes back and he says, no, you have seen it. This is the probe that you saw when you were on the Enterprise. And we did all of this because we're all dead, and we were hoping we would find somebody that's still alive that we could pass who we are to them. We could communicate to them who we are. And I guess in some way, they didn't state this, but in some way, have a record of who they were so they don't disappear like they never existed, but also in some sense, the sense of immortality, that their legacy, they exist in the future, even though they've all died. And that's how it ends. Then Picard regains his consciousness as Picard right after that. And then that's kind of the end of it. Was there anything in the plot? I flew through the plot.
Well,
out of the plot
there was a poignant moment when his wife died. That was a very touching
In
moment.
what way was it poignant? What did she say that touched you?
Well, I don't remember exactly what she said specifically, but it reminded me of my mother. Actually the opposite, because my father and mother died within a year of each other, in 2018 and 19. And I remember very strong memory as my mom sitting as my father was dying and being overwhelmed, sitting by the bedside. Yeah. So that was what it tapped into to me, that moment. Although in this case it was Picard sitting next to his wife, and she was very philosophical and kind of going, and she was very much at peace. And so in her case, but the whole episode really grabbed me emotionally, aside from the interludes on the Enterprise with the Three Stooges, kind of action, right? Yeah. And given that they did this in only 45 minutes of screen time, of which maybe 15 might have been on the Enterprise. So that left him with 30 minutes of Picard on the
Sucking
Kataan.
you into this plot.
And yet I bought into it so completely, man. I was getting choked up. I was tearing eyed. I mean, even though I knew the whole story before even, and I had seen this movie. I remembered this so well because I'd seen this, at least 10 years ago when I did a rewatch, and I was, super impressed. And I was almost hesitant to watch it again because I knew it was kind of emotionally powerful. And Picard is such a good actor.
Yeah, he is. But here's a question for you: is where do you think Picard? So there's when you go through life and try to find meaning in life, one of the things that I struggle with is meaning in life has always been defined to me as reaching your potential. That's how you've led a good life, is when you've reached your full potential. And as I've gotten older, I've second guessed that. If reaching potential may not be, I mean, it depends how you define potential. But let's put it in the context of Picard. Was reaching his potential, was he happier as the captain of the Enterprise or as Kanan? What do you think he was happier?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, it's hard to compare because
we're so used to seeing him as this huge captain.
Yeah.
And obviously that's what he needs to be doing in his life, because he's making such a huge difference in the world, and that he should be doing that. But is he really making that much of a difference in the world? I mean, if all of us are here for 80 years or so, even if we're a starship captain, we're going to be gone. And then how much of a difference have we really made after that? If you, in the context of a billion years, how significant is it? So, is it really important to be a Starfleet captain versus just being a good person, living in a happy life, in a simple, happy life? I mean, going into this episode, if I asked you, I'm not even letting you answer, but I'll let you answer now. If going into this show, if I said, if you were Picard, would you rather have been a Starfleet captain? Is that a better use of your life? Or would you rather have just been married, had grandkids, and enjoyed them every day of your life? Going into this episode, it'd be really easy to say, well, duh. I mean, who wouldn't want to be? Obviously, being a Starfleet captain is just amazing. That's what he should be doing. But when you look at this, it's like, I don't know. Did you get that out of it? That maybe being a Starfleet captain isn't the be all end all?
No, I mean, I didn't focus on that, I would say. I mean, that's certainly a possible way of reacting to the show. I mean, this show is so well done that there's a huge range of possible reactions amongst the audience. So I think it is, and I think it depends on what you can have different reactions depending on where you are in your life when you watch the shows, which is what I think makes it, I think that's one of the signs of good, of great art.
Right. Every person can personalize it and get something personal out of it. So I'm asking you though, is it important in your life to do these amazing things, achieve incredible achievements, versus just being a good guy?
Well, I mean, I've always tried. I mean, I've always thought of myself as being kind of rebellious in that regard, in terms of not accepting society's definition of achievement. So, I mean, I would say that I've been achievement oriented, but I've been tried to define my own sense of achievement. So, I decided that, for example, if to me, you could define achievement, if you, I'm not saying that this is the only way to define it, but you could define achievement as being, as appreciating the small things as much as possible, as much as living within the moment as much as possible, and savoring the moment, like going to, being present, as they say in the meditation community, although I'm not into meditation, but I understand where they're coming from with this idea of being present as an objective, that you don't want to be either, sort of, you don't want to have too much remorse about the past, nor too much anxiety about the future. Both of those are kind of negative, and both of those are negative sentiments and emotions, and they take you away from the present. So one could define,
well, even being optimistic, don't take a negative, but being present means avoiding the lure of optimism, of saying, oh, if I do A, B, and C, I'm going to have this amazing life in the future. People did that with retirement, is they would like, okay, I'm busting my ass now, but in 50 years, I'm going to retire and it's going to be amazing. That's also not living in the present.
Correct. Yeah,
and that's
over
not
planning,
and that's the opposite.
Over planning. Yeah. So I mean, I would definitely I would definitely sort of accept the possibility that Picard could have been, or that Kanan could be happier and more fulfilled than Picard. Although Picard seems like a very fulfilled individual. So it's really comparing two very fulfilled individuals, not one unfulfilled and one fulfilled.
He says that. Yeah, he says that at one moment. He said, in my past life, I didn't want to have children.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then now I can't imagine my life without them.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that's a regret or what, but I don't know. I don't know if Picard doesn't seem happy per se, but happiness isn't the definition of a good life anyway. You could just want to have a bunch of powerful, diverse experiences, which isn't equivalent to being happy, but it's if you had he actually has this choice. They created a scenario where he's given a choice of having a more worldly life versus being on the Enterprise. In a show I watched yesterday,
you're holding your
where where in a show I watched yesterday, he was this was after he had this traumatic experience becoming a Borg, and he decided to unwind by going back to his hometown in France with his brother. And they're trying to convince him, hey, you need to give up being a Starfleet commander and just hang around this little village in France, in a small country village in France. And we'd love to have you, and you'll have a wonderful life here. And so he was actually given that choice, is being around loving people, not surviving threats every day, as he does on the Enterprise. And it's not an obvious decision. I think I don't know that most people decide to go for the sky, for the stars. I think most people decide not to, but for the reason that Picard identified for not doing it. He decided not to stay on the planet, on the Earth, and in this small French town, because he would have not gone forward because of fear, because of fear of the Borg and all these stressful things. Once he got over his fear, he went right back to being a Starfleet commander. He said, "No, I'm out of here," because for a period there, he was contemplating staying on Earth and having a very normal life. But the decision was based on fear, not about whether he wants to be present or not present. But I look at Picard's life, and I don't know. I don't know when I compare the life of Kanan and Picard. Kanan was a very wise individual, and he seemed to be very good at sharing his wisdom with other people and bringing them into his life and making their life better. I don't necessarily think that his life as Picard was much better than that. It could have been done by somebody else.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it's fair to try to compare them. So, I mean, I think everybody has their own circumstances. Within Picard's circumstance, within his, range of possibilities, I don't think he has anything to regret as Picard compared to, I don't know. I mean, I'm not, I feel I feel that life is sort of a process of I mean, I feel like I'm different people at different times in my life. So I feel like what I'm doing at a certain time in my life might be appropriate for me at this point in time, and might feel inappropriate for me at another point in time. But
Or maybe that's the best answer is you need to fill your life with as many experiences as you can. So just being Kanan maybe lacks the richness of being Picard at one point, and Kanan having being both.
Yeah, right.
Is maybe better than being one or the other.
Well, I don't think it's better. I think everybody just does. To me, it's more about coping. I mean, I don't. I feel like life is not. I kind of feel like I'm more British in this regard. So the John Cleese and some of the Monty Python guys, they always talk about their Britishness and how the Brits are so driven by social anxiety and shame, and that they just want to die without embarrassing themselves. it's kind of like, you know, it's like, oh, thank God I got through it without embarrassing myself completely. So I feel like unfortunately for me, I kind of grew up with, I think I became a shame-driven person early, and so I kind of feel like life is, for me, it's the challenge is enjoying life is a challenge compared to feeling like I haven't done as much as I could do. So
I've taken happiness as no longer being the definition or the standard to judge my own life, because what I've seen is that, well, first of all, I think happiness is easy if you want it to be. If you go through life with your eyes closed to all the suffering, it's really easy to be happy. And you see that with a lot of religious nuts, is they just think, well, it's nothing's in my hand. God's controlling everything, so I'm not going to worry about anything because God's going to take care of it. And so you see this beautiful smile, and their skin's always perfect, and they're always happy. Everything's wonderful. Yeah, but you've missed out on 90% of the world. And I think all of us privileged people, I include myself and yourself in this category, we're relatively privileged. I think we miss out when we don't know what it's like to suffer. I really do. I think the fact that we haven't suffered, and I've gone through some challenges recently where I had to do physical labor. And that's when I realized I'd never done physical labor in my life. Mm-hmm. I think me and you talked about, because you said you did. You said you were like a bricklayer, roof. You did roofs or something in the summer. And so the thing that I've done is I've done physical exercise, where if something hurts, I just don't do it. And I'm not going to work out at the gym for a month because my elbow hurts a little bit. And then as a laborer, all of a sudden, all sorts of things start hurting, and you still got to show up. And I've never experienced that. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm almost 60 years old. And this is wonderful. This is like a whole set of experiences I never had before. This is like something new. And that's when I realized how not important happiness is, that there's experiencing diverse things in life, given that you have such a limited time on this planet. Just experiencing different things is so important, that all these people that we're talking about that choose to just have a happy life, just have the Picard, or not the Picard, the Kanan life. A lot of people just choose to have that life, can go through their entire life not experiencing any of these gut-wrenching challenges that people that don't have these privileges have to experience. And I think, honestly, they're missing out. I mean, they're happier, yes, but there's so many experiences they're missing out on.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to compare myself to other people, but I do inevitably compare myself or compare my experience with their experiences. So, I mean, I personally lived my life seeking out different experiences, and I kind of was a collector of experience, as I think I mentioned to you in another discussion where I was saying, that at one point when I was younger, I thought, I would like to write, but in order to write, I need to live. So in order to live, I need to experience. In order to experience, I need to take some chances and do different things. And so I did different things. And I mean, I do have lived in a lot of different places and did several different types of work, etc. So, so I personally valued that life. I personally valued this kind of a experience collecting, if you will. And I prided myself on my memory and tried to kind of try to sort of record as much as I could, but of course memory is not perfect, so you wind up losing it over time. And then, I mean, I remember on those bike rides, like I took 2 big bike rides, one with you and another one 2 years later, and on each of those bike rides, the immersion in life was so intense. It was, every aspect of every day was an experience that I was trying to remember at the time. And I remember thinking that I will always remember these moments. Like there were times when I was, and at this point, obviously I can't, but I can remember now. There were moments when I'm like pedaling along thinking, I'll remember this moment for the rest of my life. I'll always remember going over this hill, cresting over this hill, and seeing the ocean on the far side of that hill.
So let me ask you, if you forget it, does that negate its value?
Well, it's like you said, this is the sort of existential question of the episode, because these people went through this effort to create the probe in order to share so that they would be, that somebody somewhere might recognize that they once upon a time existed. Does that really validate their existence any more than if they had never been, if they were not remembered? I mean, I think it's a bit of a fallacy to some degree, this idea of people being, it's a kind of a false, it's almost like a fantasy of semi-immortality, that you will be remembered as long as your name is spoken, type of thing. You've heard this phrase, a man never dies as long as his name is spoken. I can't remember, maybe that's from Game of Thrones or something like that.
In the episode.
But I mean, I think this is a story we tell ourselves, because
they alluded to it in the episode. Sorry.
I don't know if they say it on this episode, but it's out there.
When they said when they said they're going to name the child Patai, so that his legacy will live on. But Patai's dead. Whether you name him Patai or not, it's not going to change that.
Right, and it's all a matter of scale. I mean, you may be even the best case person, one out of several, out of however many humans have existed in cumulatively, we have 6 billion now, maybe 20 billion cumulatively, I don't know. But of those, you have a handful of Da Vinci's and Einstein's and Picasso's, and everybody else is forgotten within a generation. So I mean, that either if you accept that kind of you're alive as long as your name is spoken, it's only 99.9% of us are failures in that regard, right? We're all failures in that. And if that's the rule, of the game, then we're all losers. So I think that's a kind of a bad story to tell ourselves. I mean, I think the key is to just appreciate, or at least for myself, I'd rather just say that I'm happy if I'm forgotten immediately, as long as I and here's a case where there's a word in Portuguese that in English, I'm not sure what the equivalent is, aproveitar, to take advantage of, but take advantage of in a good way, not take advantage of, to appreciate, I guess, appreciate, like take advantage of and appreciate is combined, right? So I think that's a good, I don't think English has a great word that combines the two together, come to think of it. I mean, because we can say you're taking advantage of it, but you don't, leverage. That doesn't mean you're always appreciating it. And you can
leverage something, right?
Yeah, leverage, but I mean, I don't know.
Limited context.
What I mean is to do both, to basically take advantage of the good times and appreciate them as good times. So one of the reasons I like Brazil and Brazilians is that I don't feel like I'm like them. In fact, I feel like I'm unlike them, but they make me better because I try to be more like them. They allow me to be more, to be less British, if you will, and more more in the moment. Because Brazilians, if I had to characterize them in one way, what is the one superpower that they have, or at least they did have? I don't know if they're going to continue because they're becoming so, Americanized, if you will, the cultural hegemony. But the one superpower they do have is that I feel like they're the most emotionally free people that I've ever met, in the sense that they allow themselves to be happy and they allow themselves to be sad, or but they're ashamed of neither. They're neither, they sort of they respect the spectrum of emotion, and they encourage people, they encourage themselves and they encourage other people to allow themselves to feel, as opposed to suppressing or fighting.
Isn't shame an integral part of Catholicism? I mean, that's what I learned in college, and they're Catholics, right?
Yes, but they're not. That's a good point. But they're, for some reason, the Southern Catholic and the Northern Catholic experiences are very different. So, like, I came out of the Irish Catholic background, which is extremely fear-driven or shame-driven and kind of puritanical,
more reserved. Yeah.
And whereas the Brazilians are far from that. I mean, to them, they look, I mean, at the risk of oversimplifying, but for the kind of popular Brazilian, their Catholicism is more just the kind of belief that God is that whatever happens is happening because God wanted them to experience it, and that it's up to them to kind of approve, to survive it, or to be grateful for it. So, so when good things are happening, they're grateful for it. And when bad things are happening, they're like, well, this must be something I'm meant to endure, and I have to endure it. That's really what what it seems to me, that's what their faith comes down to. And they don't have any of this kind of shame. Certainly they don't have shame related to sex, and that, we have in the puritanical US Anglo culture. That's almost absent from their alien to them. So
if we can go back to the immortality question, so I think it's people seem to think that having children is their way to gain immortality, right? And I don't remember. I think it was what is that guy's name? Bill Barr or Burr?
From where? From college?
He's a stand-up comedian.
Oh, Bill Burr.
What's that? No.
Bill Burr.
He's like the most famous comedian right now.
Bill Burr,
comic.
Bill
Burr.
Yeah, Bostonian.
He said he had this great bit. Where he's like, he doesn't get where people like regular white guys like him are having kids. It's like the world already has that. They don't need another one of those. So why do you feel the need to give the world just one more white kid like you're something special? And I look at the vegan community and the same thing. It's like, why are you vegans who are going on and on about how humans are destroying the planet by causing pain and suffering to all these animals, having this huge footprint on the planet? Why are you having kids when there's millions of orphans that don't? If you really feel the need to expound your wisdom on someone, grab an orphan. You're so adamant as a vegan that, oh, it's horrible when you go to a puppy mill and you get a special dog for you, when there's all these stray dogs being euthanized on the streets, in the shelters every day. No, you have to get your own little special puppy. Yet they'll go and have their own kids when there's millions of people, orphans, that have no future. So, that's pure arrogance to me, is that humans can be so egocentric and arrogant that their life is somehow so special that it needs to be passed on and go on and on and on forever. What I've seen is people are more proud of their grandchildren than they are of their children, because that seems to extend their life even one more generation. And like all of this business with kids, it's going to be really hard for somebody to convince me it's not ego driven. Because like I said, if it was really about the kids, go adopt. There's kids starving. Oh, I know it's hard. I mean, it's in the States, but overseas, there are lots of kids. If you go through the process, lots of refugees that don't have any parents. Why are you producing your own mini-me other than your ego?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I have to, as you and I, neither of us have children, so we have to be upfront about that, or at least that you know of, or I know of. So, and I kind of chose not to have children, if you will, because
well, Fritz, to be fair, all your wires are all gummied up. So after your operation, I don't think you can have any kids anyway.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I used to think. I mean, I agree with you to some degree, to some extent. I mean, a person. I mean, I'm hesitant to criticize what I don't have personal experience with, is I guess my point. So somebody who has children might say, well, you can't say anything because you don't have children. If you did, you would understand why it's so important.
Explain to me. No, I never said you can't have children. I'm saying, why do you need biological children?
That's that part
argument.
Right. That part I understand.
It's the only argument I'm making.
Well, okay. So
there's already, as you mentioned, 10 billion people or 20 billion people on the planet. Do we really need one more you? What's so special about you that we need one more just like you?
Yeah, I agree with you that there's ego involved. Although people might say that, that there's a certain, that's our responsibility. Some people might say, well, it's my responsibility. Part of my responsibility to my forebears is that I will have children in order to continue the line, that I received.
Yeah, and who the hell are your forebears? Now, if you can tell me that it's unique. So in this episode, this is like the last of the planet, right? So in that case, if there's no more people of your species, then yeah, maybe it makes sense to have a continued legacy of some kind. But if there's 20 billion people, there's nothing special about you, your family, or you go down your whole family tree. None of that really is going to matter enough that you have to add one more of you into this planet.
I mean, I'm sympathetic with your perspective, so I can't argue against it, to be honest. I mean, that's my perspective as well. But I'm just saying that, and I do think that a lot of people just going back to our earlier discussion, which was about kind of what is a meaningful life, or what is a satisfactory life. I mean, a lot of people basically turn all of their energy towards their children at one point, and then when their children disappoint them, they focus on their grandchildren, because a lot of people try to live through their children and decide,
because why? Because they can't accept their mortality. They haven't dealt with their mortality.
Either that, or they haven't. It's that, or also, that they feel that they haven't achieved everything that they wanted to achieve, but maybe their children can, in the achievement kind of focused, driven world. So, and also they get feedback, though. They also get feedback. So the one thing I will say, that as somebody aging as we are, I did think to myself, well, there's nothing that prevents me from dying tomorrow. And I wish I could say that, would be happy to tell people that have no regrets. I lived a long life, long enough life, and that I'm happy to go at this point. And I think to myself, I don't want to be like a doddering person. I don't really want to be alive in an incapacitated way or in any sort long term.
Yeah.
So I'd rather be dead than kind of living in an elder home, and with around the clock care. So I'm thinking, what is it that keeps these people alive? And to some degree, the one thing that you could say, the one thing that does keep certain people alive is their ability to kind of live vicariously through their grandchildren, right? So there is this kind of this survival benefit to the elderly to have children that they can live through. But to your point, they could just, if they truly, they theoretically could live just as well through adopted children as they could through their biological children. The only thing about biological children is that there may be, I'm sure there are biological responses that kick in to having the children. I mean, obviously, mothers get a huge type of chemical, they go on a chemical trip, basically. They're like transformed into different creatures from having children in terms of their biochemistry for at least a few years. They're on a completely different level. Now, whether that happens to fathers, I'm sure there's a huge biological kick to the father as well. So now, how much of that I don't know if it's been studied, but I guess it would be an interesting study to see how much of that is or is not present in people that adopt. Do the people that adopt get similar biological, kicks?
Yeah, you have a friend of mine, Raphael, has one.
Oh,
their first son is biological. Their second child, the daughter, was adopted.
Uh-huh.
And I asked him that, and I says, "What are your feelings towards each child?" Probably isn't something you want to publicize, but he swore up and down to me that they're equally his children. He doesn't feel that one is more or less.
No, I'm sure they do. I believe that there's no reason that they shouldn't feel I'm sure you can bond just as much emotionally. You can bond just as you can bond emotionally. I'm referring more to the involuntary reactions that may happen to like brain chemistry and that type of stuff that might happen to biological parents.
The one thing that people seem to like to see ongoing is uniqueness. Like, nobody cares about an animal unless you put it on the endangered list. If you say that's the last, white snow leopard or whatever, all of a sudden that's like really important. And in this case, in the last episode, this is like the last of the species. Well, that's really important.
Right.
But in just all through life, it's like, we just went through the NCAA tournament. We're going through it. It's like, this is the first 15th ranked team to make the final 8. Like, oh, that's really important. It's like we have this sensationalism about uniqueness that is like, when everything is, if it's more of it than just one, if it's ordinary, it's not something that reaches our radar. But if you tell somebody, regardless of how silly it is, if this is like the only X, even if it's this X thing you don't even really care about, if it's the only X, all of a sudden now you care about it. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but with immortality. But it's like I said, it's tied in with extinction. When it's the last of something, all of a sudden we really seem to care about it. So something about uniqueness, maybe it's what we were saying before, is like everybody wants to have this diversity of experience. And when you lose the last of anything, all of a sudden your life is not going to be as rich anymore.
Well, I would say that to me, it's more than just I would extend that argument to apply just generally to this concept of importance. I mean, I think we hallucinate our life is one long hallucination where we're hallucinating importance all along the way, right? I mean, we wake up in the morning and we think, what's important today, and what am I going to do today, and what's important tomorrow. I mean, we're constantly hallucinating. We're constantly.
The example I gave before, but what I was going to say is the example I gave before is the importance of Picard as a Starfleet commander or captain. You think that's like really important. But in the big picture, does he really, even as like the pinnacle of achievement, Starfleet captain, is it really that important that he's a Starfleet captain? Could he have just gone through life as Kanan and that have been just as well? And I mean, to me, when you look at this episode, that's what I came out of it, is like this false sense of grandeur about importance. And people really do this in their jobs. Is like when you get somebody talking about their job, some minuscule moving paper from one end of their desk to the other, and somehow when they talk about it, it's like they're changing the world. You really see just how involved people can get into these little micro worlds, thinking that every little thing that happens in this micro world actually is going to have any meaning in 100 years. Like nothing we can do. That's the thing, is nothing we can do is going to really matter in 100 or 200 years.
Yeah, no, I agree. And most of the things we do doesn't matter next week. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, most of what we do is so irrational. I'll give you an example of, sports itself, or being a spectator sports, is one of the most irrational things that you could ever conjure up, because first of all, we're living vicariously through people acting for us. Secondly, we're somehow feeling better. We're somehow getting the transitive law of championship. So as a fan, I'm somehow better for being a fan of the winning team.
Nothing's changing in your life.
Yeah,
if the team wins or loses.
Right, and then there's situations where I've realized that, like, for example, here's a case in point. Like when the Olympics come around, I love watching the men's and women's volleyball teams. I'm like, this is the greatest sport. Why don't I like this sport when it's, I think to myself, man, this is so intense. Why isn't this the most popular sport in the world?
Track, the world's most boring thing, watching people running up and down. And during the Olympics, that's the most amazing thing. Other than the Olympics, who's going to watch people just run up and down a track?
But yes, true. But I would say that track is sort of objective. I hate to use this word objectively, but volleyball is an incredibly, you could make an argument for volleyball being an incredibly good spectator sport. I mean, it's concentrated right in a space. You can watch the entire thing. It's not like downhill skiing where the guys you can't hardly see what's happening. He's past you. I mean, it's a perfect spectator sport, and the athletes are amazing. I mean, they're as good or better than basketball play. To me, basketball is so devalued because the players are so. It's like me playing. When I watch basketball now, I feel like they're the equivalent of me playing Nerf basketball with in my living room against my
everything's too easy.
It's so easy for them, and it's not even. But volleyball, on the other hand, is like this extremely competitive sport at this high level. I mean, every point is amazing, right? I mean, it's like I feel like Louis C.K. should do his thing about volleyball. It's like every point is amazing. I mean, every point is like the greatest acrobatic.
The digs people come up with.
Yeah, it's so fantastic.
The reflexes, the spikes are amazing. The blocks are amazing.
I mean, it's just amazing, and I'm just like, and I'm so into particularly because I'm cheering for Brazil, and it's like one of the few things they're good at. So
they're pretty good,
and they're amazing at it, and so I think to myself, after the Olympics, I'm going to continue to watch, and then I never do, and it's the same game. I mean, I could go tomorrow to some professional volleyball game in the neighboring city and probably see it in something which is technically on a near par.
So you can give
So it's
objective reasons why
arbitrary
volleyball is great.
Hmm?
Football, but on the other hand, is the opposite. It's like it shouldn't be a good sport. It's just got so many stops. You're talking about how there's these 2-minute commercials on TV.
Yeah.
Well, other than the hurry up offense, which fortunately a lot of people are taking. In the old days, remember in the old days, people would huddle up for like a minute.
Yeah.
You would just be sitting there watching people just standing around after every freaking play for a minute doing nothing. I mean, objectively, football is just a really bad sport, and people other than Americans recognize that. When they say, "How do you guys watch the sport? Just stop and go and stop and go." And people are used to soccer, watching American football, just get bored to hell out of it. Baseball, by the way, is even much worse than football, because I went to a baseball game. You sit there for minutes just watching a guy get ready to go to the plate.
Yeah,
that's it. He's chalking up. He's pounding the bat, he's hitting the corner with the bat, all meaning nothing.
Yeah. Well, one of the great pleasures, one of my great pleasures,
where every minute is just spikes and digs.
Yeah. I mean, one of my great pleasures of being an expatriate American is explaining American culture to non-Americans. It's like, it's really delightful because you wind up seeing it when you try to explain it. You realize how stupid, or not stupid, but you realize how kind of weird and arbitrary some of these things are. And as a kind of coming from an anthropology perspective, you see how everything is just symbolism is really what we are. We're like symbolic, we're symbol factories, and we just create we have all these symbols, and we're constantly raising their values and lowering their values, and this is more important. And
as a non-American, I love watching. I grew up playing baseball. I did not grow up watching baseball. So a lot of things in American sport, watching it is really strange to me. When I love watching the dynamics of when a pitcher almost hits a batter, right? At first, nothing happens, right? And then all of a sudden, it starts escalating. And there's like no limit to where it starts with first just looking at each other, the batter and the pitcher, and then it just starts escalating and escalating and escalating. And then sometimes it's an all-out brawl where both benches come in. And I'm just watching. It's like, from a non-American, I don't know what just happened. I mean, because I guess there's, like you said, there's a symbolism involved that unless you know the nuances, maybe the guy tried to hit him on purpose. I don't know what's happening, but there's a lot of dynamics there that's culturally built in to an American that a non-American watches that, like, what the hell just happened?
Well, I haven't watched baseball in so long myself. I loved baseball as a child. In baseball, to me, it's boring as hell right now, but it's all about how invested you are. That's the point I'm saying. It's all arbitrary. The level of investment that you want to make in something as a spectator is truly kind of up to you. You can get heavily invested, or you can get uninvested or divested. So,
but what's strange is when people think objectively their sport is better, like NASCAR. Sure, when you're invested, you know all the names and whatever, but if you're not invested, it's a bunch of cars going in circles.